The candidates, Republican incumbent Don Bacon, seeking his second term, and Democrat Kara Eastman. It's a little less than an hour.
This is a KETV Newswatch 7 Commitment 2018 special, a debate in the race for Congress. The Republican incumbent, Don Bacon, and the Democratic challenger, Kara Eastman, in Nebraska's District 2. Here is KETV Newswatch 7's Rob McCartney.
And good evening. We're pleased to be partnering with the Greater Omaha Chamber to bring you this Commitment 2018 special. We're joined this evening by Republican incumbent Congressman Don Bacon and the Democrat candidate for Congress in Nebraska's District 2, Kara Eastman. Thank you both for taking part in this forum.
Thank you.
Before we begin, we want to give you the format. Both candidates will get an opening and a closing statement. We will alternate which candidate gets the first chance to respond to each question. Each candidate will get 90 seconds for a response, 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Toward the end of the hour, we may eliminate rebuttals for the last question. That way we can have time for a closing statement. Now, the questions will come from our panelists, KETV Newswatch 7's Julie Cornell and David Earl. Now, there was a coin flip with the campaigns, and that determined the order of the opening and the closing statements. So we begin with Congressman Bacon.
Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching tonight. First, I want to express our condolences to the victims of that heinous crime yesterday in Pittsburgh. That was terrible. And take the time to denounce and to say that anti-Semitism anywhere in this country is terrible and we reject it. Secondly, I bring my 30 years of experience to Congress as a brigadier general, 4 deployments to the Middle East and 5 commands, and I've had a positive impact on the national security of our country, as well as the homeland security for our country as well, because I serve in both of those committees. But I also serve in the Agriculture Committee, and I bring my farm roots, my family traditions, to that committee where I've been able to make a positive difference for farmers, as well as our agribusiness that's so important to this district. So I look forward to this debate and the exchange of ideas, and I want to make the case that I am the best person to represent this great district of Nebraska, Nebraska, the 2nd District.
Kara Eastman.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I am a social worker and nonprofit executive who has been spending my entire career, over 20 years, in nonprofit work. And I'm running for Congress because I am sincerely feeling a sense of desperation right now for our country, and in particular for our children. I believe that our country is headed in the wrong direction. There's so much division in our political system. We have an ineffective Congress, and people are feeling the effects of this when they're not able to access quality, affordable health care, or they're having to work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table, or drowning in student debt. In the 160,000 doors that my campaign team and I have knocked, these are the things that people are telling us in the district, that they're looking for a representative who represents their values, and they're excited to see somebody running on a progressive but very pragmatic, common sense platform that represents who we are as Nebraskans and Americans.
All right, thank you. Another coin flip determined who will be the first to answer this opening question, and that goes to Don Bacon from Julie Cornell. Julie.
The suspect in yesterday's mass shooting in Pittsburgh, he had an assault-style weapon and handguns with him, and the tragedy again renews the debate over gun rights. Here's the question. If the Founding Fathers could meet tomorrow to update the Bill of Rights, how would you alter the text of the Second Amendment for our modern-day world?
Julie, thank you for the question. I would not change the Second Amendment. I want to protect the law-abiding citizens of this country that do things right every single day in this country. And we have fought for those, all of our Bill of Rights. So 99% of our folks do things right every day. We should protect those Second Amendment rights and not take away. Our goal should be to take away the Second Amendment rights for those who have proven themselves to be violent, felons, or those who have shown that they're a threat to themselves or others because of mental health, but after following a due process alignment with the judge. But we have done some things to make safer this violent situation that we're encountering. We had a loophole in the NICS. We called it the Fixed NICS Act that we passed. And we were able to stop felons from getting guns. That there was a loophole there after that shooting that we saw in Texas. I have worked with Chief Schmatter, our chief of police here in Omaha, and said, what can we do to make things better? He said, the biggest impetus for crime in Omaha is straw purchases, where someone will go to a store and buy a gun legally, but with the intention of giving that gun to someone who is a felon who's not allowed to have that gun. So I submitted this bill in Congress to hold people accountable that knowingly give a gun to a felon, because these folks are not spending time in jail today. And that's how Officer Orozco was murdered. And the person who gave that gun to that felon didn't spend one day in jail. So there is practical things that we can do to defend our Second Amendment rights, as well as reduce gun violence.
All right, thank you. Congressman Kara Eastman, you had a minute and a half.
So I think that that's a really interesting question to bring up, because I don't believe that the founding fathers would have ever envisioned that a group like the NRA would have so much political influence in our country, where we have politicians that get money from them, despite the fact that most responsible gun owners are not even NRA members. One of the things that I hear at the doors all the time is people are scared. They're scared of sending their kids to school. My own daughter came to me after the Parkland shooting and said that she was afraid to go to school. And this was not something that, as a parent, you ever want to hear. We need common sense gun safety regulation. The vast majority of Americans support this. 86% of Americans support background checks, mandatory waiting periods. The idea that you can just go in and buy a gun without actually having that seems so irresponsible. And we need a ban on the sale of weapons of war so that they're not getting into the hands of people who are using them to gun down people in our country. It is time for our leaders to take charge on this. It is such a shame that our young people are being more brave when it comes to common sense, proactive safety solutions to these issues, because it's time for us to take a stand and say places of worship should be havens. They should be places where people feel comfortable to go without worrying about their safety. And we need policymakers to stand up for this right now, acknowledging that there are responsible gun owners out there, but doing something about it.
Don Bacon, you have 30 seconds.
Last October, my opponent told the Omaha World-Herald that we should rewrite or consider rewriting the Second Amendment. That is an extreme position. And we do not sell weapons of war to people. Our automatic weapons, or the weapons that our military uses, are not available for sale. She's really talking about semi-automatic weapons. And again, 99% of our people are law-abiding. We should protect those Second Amendment rights. And so I oppose it. Now, we did pass the Stop School Violence Act, $900 million that I was a co-sponsor on that will help our schools become more secure, because I agree we must do more to secure our schools.
All right, Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
So what I actually told the World Herald was that we needed to look at the Second Amendment and what the Founding Fathers meant when they wrote that. And the definitions have changed over time. Again, I think they would be outraged to see the influence that groups like the NRA have. And the NRA has given money to my opponent, and therefore he stands up for people to have rights for their guns, even when these are getting in the hands of people who are using them to gun down people. That 1% is dangerous, and we need to do something about it.
Okay, our next question comes from KETV News Watch 7's David Earle. It's for Kara Eastman. David.
Ms. Eastman, the suspect in the Pittsburgh shootings appears to have expressed anti-Semitic thoughts on social media. Russian operatives are manipulating U.S. voters through social media posts. Under what circumstances would you support regulations on social media companies, and what would those regulations look like?
Well, I think it's really important right now that we're looking at the rhetoric that is coming, unfortunately, from the highest level of leadership at in this country, where these despicable acts are condoned in some ways, even provoked. And social media is playing a role in this. And I think that we need to look at the role that social media has in perpetuating violence. When we're looking at people, doing background checks on people, when we're investigating crimes, social media plays a role now. We know this. We know that, for example, in the last two cases of very, very violent acts in our country, that there was rhetoric on social media coming from people, anti-Semitic language, or information about supporting the president. And so it's time for us to look at the role that social media plays and decide what kind of proactive stances we can take to make sure that we're monitoring people properly and that we're anticipating these violent acts based on any kind of hate speech that's happening online. It's such a shame that this is being perpetuated by the President of the United States when he himself is tweeting these despicable things. And I think it's a shame that we don't have leadership in the 2nd Congressional District that's calling that out. I think that's such an important piece right now, that we need leaders who are going to stand up and put a check on this president while also making sure that we're moving the country forward.
Don Bacon, you get a minute and a half.
I think it's wrong to blame the president or Nancy Pelosi or any other political leader for the violence that we saw yesterday, by the way, who said he did not support Trump, but then the bomber said he was more pro-Trump. We're going to see people on both sides of the spectrum doing violence. It is them that are responsible. We should hold them accountable. We should be blaming President Trump or Nancy Pelosi. I didn't blame Kara Eastman when Steve Scalise was shot a year and a half ago, or I didn't blame her for yesterday, though this person was anti-Trump. It's because they are the ones responsible. It's not. So we got to get back to where holding individuals accountable and responsible and not getting into this vitriol and this demonization of the other side. So when she attributes part of this to President Trump, Kara Eastman is part of the problem. She's going to bring this, if she was elected, this animosity, this vitriol, this rancor, this demonization of the president to Washington. We have too much of that right now. We got to be willing to work together and compromise. We can disagree. I find some of the president's comments wrong, and they're not the level of presidential level that I would like. But to blame him for our murders, to say he's treasonous, like she said in a previous debate, it crosses the line. We got to do better. We got to be more civil, because if we're going to solve the immigration problem, if we're going to solve our health care issues, the left and right in this country are going to have to find rooms to compromise. Demonization undermines that.
And Kara Eastman, you have 30 seconds. I do want to remind, the question was on, would you support regulations on social media? You have 30 seconds.
I understand that, but I have to address that. The fact that Congressman Bacon continues to talk about vitriol and hatred, I stand for love of my country. I've never demonized the president. I'm just willing to call him out when I see despicable things coming out of his mouth. Hate crimes are up. The number of hate groups has increased by 22% since this president took office. And Congressman Bacon has been consistently calling me horrible names with his ads on Facebook, saying I'm dangerous, using terrible language to incite violence. This has to stop.
Don Bacon, you have 30 seconds.
I've done 0 negative ads. My opponent's done 2 negative ads. I have run only positive ads. But calling someone treasonous, blaming them for murders, that is vitriol. Now, getting to the question at hand, I've supported a Democrat bill authored by Derek Kilmer that would force folks to say who they are when they're doing these ads on Facebook, so you have transparency, just like we do with TV and radio ads. And that's how we could stop the Russians from doing these anonymous ads that create this divide. So I've already been there. I've already worked across the aisle to support a Democrat bill to make transparency on the Facebook. And that's what I do. I work across the aisle. Thank you.
Next question comes from David. It's for Congressman Bacon. David.
We'll stay on this topic, Congressman Bacon. Friday, Ms. Eastman's campaign filed a police report over a bloody animal left at the door of her campaign director. We have all witnessed the vitriol in political discourse today, and both of you, even here tonight, have called for more civility. The question is, what have you done personally, or what will you do to bridge the partisan divide and lower the temperature?
Well, first, what was done to her campaign finance director was despicable. I hope the person is caught and held accountable. There is no room for dirty campaigning or threatening or intimidation. I don't care if it's from the Democrats or Republican side. If it was one of our folks, I hope they're found and held accountable. I belong to the Civility Caucus in Congress. I've made an oath that I will work across the aisle, and I don't mind debating passionately, but I will abstain from the demonization of the other side, because that's not how we're going to solve health care. That's not how we're going to solve the immigration issues and getting people back to work in a time of, we have record low unemployment, but a lot of people still on programs, because we're going to have to work together to solve this. But I'm on the Civility Caucus. I have made the oath, and I made an oath to many. That's why I'm being supported by a group called With Honor, because they have watched me in action. It's why the Omaha World Herald endorsed me, because they said I have shown a level of civility that they liked, and that I have shown the willingness to compromise and to help solve the issues that are facing our country. I'm also on the Reform Caucus, which has to have equal number of Republicans and Democrats on it, to find out how we can reform a Congress that needs to be more effective. And finally, I'm on the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus that has to have equal number of Republicans and Democrats as well. And we need to, because we want to make our environment cleaner and safer. And I think these are issues that are bipartisan. So I've been rated in the top 29% of Congress for bipartisanship. and I did that as a freshman, and I will continue in the next term.
Kara Eastman, you get a minute and a half.
So as a social worker, we are trained to bring people together to solve problems. And that's what I've been doing in the community in Omaha for the last 12 years, is working with Republicans, Democrats, Independents to solve some of our community's biggest issues. And that's the experience and expertise that I want to bring to Congress. We need people who are, of course, going to work across the aisle, but I mean, it's interesting that my opponent says that he does that when I've met several members of Congress on the Democratic side who say they couldn't pick him out of a lineup. So this idea that he keeps perpetuating that he hasn't engaged in any of these uncivil acts is actually not necessarily true. He stood in Iowa speaking for the president and stood there and said nothing when people chanted "lock her up" about his colleague, Dianne Feinstein. He said nothing. He did nothing. He has done nothing when people have called me horrible things, when all of these negative ads are out there saying I'm dangerous or mocking me for being in a band in college or whatever it is. He's done nothing. He's never disavowed them. I'm happy to see he's disavowing this despicable act that happened to my finance director, finally standing up and saying something. But the stuff he retweets on Twitter about me is awful. I mean, he is not engaged in a civil campaign, and he takes no credit for the ads, and yet his playbook, everything he says is exactly in line with those ads that came out. He talks about me and Nancy Pelosi. He talks about me being dangerous. I mean, this is the congressman that we have, and we need better.
Don Bacon, 30 seconds.
Well, my opponent, Kara, has run 2 negative ads. She's been on for 30 seconds doing a negative ad talking about me. I have not done that. I've run only positive ads. And the thing is, the people in this district have seen that. They've witnessed her ads, and they've witnessed mine, and they know the truth. Again, I have been rated in the top 29% for bipartisanship. I have worked across the aisle. I have helped Democrats get bills or amendments passed that otherwise would not have. And I served in the military. We never asked a guy next to me, are you Republican or Democrat? We served our country and defended it, just regardless of the party.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
So the ads that we put out were not negative, they were factual. They talked about his lies about my policy stance on health care for people. They called out the fact that he's saying he's going to protect Social Security, yet he voted for a balanced budget amendment that would have cut Social Security. So these are factual ads that simply push back on all of the negativity that everyone in the district has seen coming out from Congressman Bacon and the Republican Party. It's crazy that somebody enters this arena and then faces that and then is told that they're lying. I mean, this is simply not true.
Okay, we want to go back to Julie Cornell with a question for Kara Eastman. Julie.
Ms. Eastman, regarding the caravan of Central American immigrants in Mexico, at last check there are about 5,000 people. Under what conditions would you allow some or all of them entry into the United States?
So the caravan that's coming up from Honduras is not necessarily something new. That we see this quite a lot, and it's unfortunate that this is being so politicized right now. But the reason it's being politicized is because we are in desperate need of comprehensive immigration reform in this country. I support immigration. I support people coming here seeking asylum who come through the right ways. And the United States has always been that place, that haven of security for people coming, where they could leave countries where they're facing potential murder or famine or poverty and come to the United States to work and become law-abiding citizens. And unfortunately right now, with our immoral immigration policies that start with separating families at the border and now have basically put a ban on certain people coming from certain countries completely haphazardly, this actually creates less national security for us. We need to fix our immigration system. We need to ensure that people are able to come to the United States because we actually need people to come and work here. We need it for our economy. We know that we have a deficiency in a number of our workforce places. And so we need people to come, and we need to do this in a way that works for America. We need to honor law-abiding citizens, people here under the DREAM Act. We need to honor people here under the TPS program, because the United States has always been that place that people could come to fulfill the American dream, and we need to keep that going.
Don Bacon, minute and a half.
Thank you, Julie. It's a great question. I have voted for 2 different bills that would have put more security at the border, would have brought more judges in so we could do these hearings in a more timely manner. It would have provided more infrastructure so that we could have held families together in a more humane way. These bills would have provided, in one case, E-Verify, that would have helped us enforce legal employment, but also would have provided, in one bill, a permanent status for DACA, another one, a pathway to citizenship, that also the president endorsed. It was a comprehensive bill. It would have helped solve this issue that we have today. It would have made us more prepared for this caravan when it arrives, because we would have had the judges available and the infrastructure there, or at least the funding would have been in place to eventually have that. So for the caravan, I believe that we have to make sure that all those folks are processed and have a judicial hearing before they're released to properly and legally gauge the refugee status. And we just have to remember that we want to protect the rule of law in this country when it comes to legal immigration. I talked to the Philippine leadership recently. There's a 10-year wait for Filipinos to come to America. They speak English. Many of them have degrees. They want to work here. A 10-year wait. I work a lot with our Indian community, and they have a wait that's beyond 20 years to come here legally. And they come here wanting to work. They have the degrees. And so we want to respect legal immigration and those who are trying to do it right. But yet, we got to realize conditions are tough in Central America, so let's ensure that each one gets a hearing to determine appropriate refugee status.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
Well, look, again, I think we have to look at who we are as a country. Our country was made up of immigrants coming here. My family came here as immigrants. And the way that right now immigrants are treated, again, the idea that the first thing we're going to do is lock them up and have them go through hearings, instead of actually looking at our place in a global society, how we're actually going to allow immigrants to come to this country through guest worker programs, through ways that we actually where we need immigrants to come here and help us. And I think that what's happening at the federal level is so immoral and based on racism that we've just never seen this before in the United States of America.
Okay, Don Bacon, you get 30 seconds.
Well, I think we have to do due process at the border. We have been doing catch and release for years, and many do not come back for their hearings. And so that violates a border, and it makes it a broken border. So we have to ensure that we have the judicial infrastructure in place to handle this. But again, I say we want to improve and expand legal immigration. We have individuals from all over this world waiting 10 and 20 plus years to come here legally, and that's what we want to also protect. And again, I have voted for 2 bills that would have secured the border, put that infrastructure there, and would have protected DACA. And I've also been a supporter of TPS.
Okay, Julie has another question. This time, Don Bacon will respond. Julie.
Well, kind of staying on this theme, President Trump said Wednesday that mass migration in Europe has caused a total mess on the continent. Do you think that migration to the United States threatens the same in our country?
If we did it at the same levels that Europe did, it would create us problems. We need to ensure that we have good vetting when it comes to refugees. We have to know and realize that there have been some terrorist acts in France and Germany from the refugees. And not all of those terrorist attacks came from refugees. Some were second-generation immigrants. But I would say that we want to have an orderly process, good vetting. But yeah, we have to do our part in the world because there is a refugee problem, and America has to do its part. My dad brought in, when I was 13 years old, a Vietnamese who had served in the Marines for South Vietnam in 1975. He came here with one suitcase and didn't speak English, but he loved this country, became the most patriotic American you'd ever meet. And he retired owning a company of 500 employees, doctors and nurses. So refugees come here and they know the greatness of this country, but it's got to be orderly. We need to have vetting. And that's why I would say we need to look at each person that comes to our border with this caravan. It needs to be done right. It needs to be done with order and respect of this rule of law. Thank you.
Kara Eastman, you get it 90 seconds, minute and a half.
Well, it's important to point out that actually the majority of immigrants who are here illegally are here because they've overstayed their visas, not because they've come in through the southern border. And so, building a wall or all of the stuff that the Republicans are talking about doing would not actually solve the problem. And right now, the issue is that the Republican Party is not interested in solving our immigration problem. They're interested in scaring Americans into believing that Europe has been taken over by refugees. I used to live in Europe, and this rhetoric is not absolutely true there. So the reality is we have good vetting when it comes to refugees in our country. I'm friends with several refugees who said they waited 15 years in a refugee camp to come to the United States. We have orderly vetting, as the congressman said. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need something that's actually going to work for the best interest of the United States of America. Right now, if you vote for Congressman Bacon, you will be voting for his leader on the Republican side who will not support comprehensive immigration reform. So despite what he says, his voting record, he's been 97% with his own party. He will vote with his party on immigration, and we will get nowhere. We need somebody in Congress who is looking for moral, decent immigration policies that actually expand us into the global economy that we are.
Don Bacon, 30 seconds.
I have voted 100% of the time for what I said I would do 2 years ago and what I was elected to do. And we do need portions of the wall at the border, what our Border Patrol says we need. It's not just immigration. We have fentanyl coming across the border that's helping contribute to the death of 70,000 Americans this year because of drug overdose. We have Al-Qaeda and ISIS trying to infiltrate from Brazil through Central America, Guatemala, so they have 40 Sunni extremists in custody. And we also have human trafficking. We saw an increase of 300% last year. So the wall is not just about immigration. It's about protecting us from these other crimes.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
This is, again, the problem that we have in this district with our congressional leadership. It's a lack of leadership. The wall is not the right solution. We know this. We know that people can go under the wall. They come over the wall. There are other ways to get in the country. We need comprehensive, moral immigration reform to fix this problem so that we can stop talking about it and actually start moving forward as a country.
David, your next question to Kara Eastman.
Ms. Eastman, in light of the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, do you feel the Trump administration is beholden to Saudi Arabian influence and interest? The Saudi story about what happened seems to change by the day. What steps should the U.S. take to demand the full truth from the Saudis?
So with this story coming to light, I think we've all seen that the president and his family do have significant business ties to the Saudis. And we saw the president go back and forth over this, of whether or not he believed them, and now he's saying he doesn't. And I mean, this is, again, where we have this haphazard foreign policy position coming from the highest level of leadership in the country, and it is endangering our national security. We continue to alienate our allies. And with the Saudi regime, we have to do something about this. We know that the Saudis have perpetuated such violence in Yemen that this also threatens the United States' security, because the Yemeni people are blaming us. They're blaming us for selling weapons to the Saudi Arabians. They're taking pictures of undetonated bombs, say made in America, on them. And it's unfortunate right now, even like unthinkable, that the President of the United States has these business ties where he's worried about one thing, and that's protecting his own assets and protecting his own family. He's not standing up for America the way that he needs to.
Don Bacon, minute and a half.
I think it's important to protect the security of this country. I believe that's what the administration is trying to do with Secretary of Defense Mattis and our Secretary of State, because Saudi Arabia is very important to the national security. Vis-a-vis, we have Iran, which that's the main issue there. But let's step back for a second. That crime was terrible committed to that journalist. And I think we do demand an answer from the Saudi government. They need to step forward and hold folks accountable. Was probably likely in their intelligence service, but we need to see the Saudis hold those murderers accountable before we can step forward. But it's also important to realize you got to weigh this in what's going on in that region. Iran is the #1 threat in that region. They threaten Israel. And Saudi Arabia is part of the alliance that counters Iran, which is an existential threat to the Israelis. So we have to be careful with this, because in the end, our alliance is not with just Saudi Arabia, but with also the other Sunni Arabs there. And we're seeing a closening of that relationship with our greatest ally in that region, Israel, because there's a common threat. That's Iran. And Iran is shipping these weapons to Hezbollah, Hamas. And I advocate we do got to hold Saudi Arabia accountable. We need to watch them and force them to hold the murderers accountable. But in the end, we want to ensure that we do not undermine our national strategy in that region, because Iran is really the biggest threat. And they have killed over 1,000 Americans in Iraq. over the last decade and a half, and that through their Shia militias. So we have to put it in relative terms. They're the biggest threat.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
We do need to make sure that Iran is not the #1 threat in that region. And one of the ways we could do that would be to stay in the Iran nuclear deal. The fact that we are now giving them more power to have more nuclear weapons. It wasn't a perfect deal, but rather than getting out of it, we could have just renegotiated it, which is what the president should have done. And when we talk about, the Saudi government needed to be held accountable, this president is not willing to do that, and a Congress that supports him is also not willing to do that.
Don Bacon, 30 seconds.
I served 4 deployments in the Middle East. I did a year in Iraq with General Petraeus. The Iranian militias were killing Americans left and right. They are our adversary. And that Iran agreement was a disgrace. We sent $100 billion back to them in that frozen money, and then gave a 10-year sunset clause on their nuclear weapons so they could become a legitimate nuclear power in 10 years. It was wrong. We could never accept Iran as a nuclear power, but yet this agreement built the framework and baked that in, a legitimate nuclear program in 10 years. We have to say no nuclear weapons and get rid of that sunset clause that was in that agreement.
Okay, we have been asking our viewers for their questions, and we've received several from the same topic. It has to deal with your stand on Social Security. Both of you have exchanged accusations on Social Security. For the record, please outline how you would change the program and how you would finance reform with the federal government's deficit reaching $1 trillion. Don Bacon, you're first.
Well, according to the Congressional Budget Office, these aren't my terms, that in 2037, what's 2034, and our improved economy has built this out for 3 more years, but that Social Security would become insolvent. That is CBO's terms, which means that those payments that would, the only payments going out would be the money that was coming in that month. That would be a 25% reduction in Social Security pay. So we have to work on this now because it's easier to work on it now than to wait until 2037. And I want to take a moment to thank the Omaha World-Herald for correcting the false information that Kara put out in one of our debates saying that I wanted to privatize Social Security. I appreciate that our journalism showed that that was not the case. So I think that we can do at least 2 things to add longevity and strength to Social Security. Because in the end, I want to support and keep it strong for those who have paid in. And we want to keep it strong for those going into their retirement because they're counting on it. So I believe that we can index the cap with inflation. So that will help raise that cap with inflation and over time so we don't have to keep voting on it this year or that year and making those fixes. Secondly, we have to realize that the life expectancy for those 40 years and younger are 84 years old. And if people are retiring at 67, it's hard to make that math work and keep the benefits where we want them. So I think we should look at those 2 areas first. But I'm committed to saving Social Security for our senior citizens and for all who are paying in.
Kara Eastman, minute and a half.
So this is, again, typical bait-and-switch Bacon, where he says one thing and does another. By voting for the balanced budget amendment, he voted to cut Social Security. Those are benefits that have been earned by senior citizens. That's your money that you pay into this system and that you deserve back. What the CBO actually did say was that 3% of Social Security was becoming insolvent. 97% of Social Security comes from people paying into that system. What we need to do is actually raise or even eliminate the tax cap on Social Security so that somebody who's making $500,000 a year is paying more than somebody who's making $125,000 a year. What Congressman Bacon did do, which actually refutes his claim that he doesn't want to privatize Social Security, is he filled out a questionnaire where he said that he would be in favor of privatizing parts of FICA. That is Social Security. So he actually did say that in a questionnaire, and I would love for him to respond to that. Raising the retirement age is not the solution right now. If you're a Wall Street banker and you have a desk job, it's one thing for you to say it's easy to, raise the retirement age. But if you are a person working like most people do in manual labor, construction, being up on a ladder when you're 70 years old is not always the right way to go. My uncle is that age, and I can't imagine him on a ladder. We need to understand how working people actually function, and we need somebody who's not so out of touch that he's claiming that just raising the retirement age is the answer.
Don Bacon, 30 seconds.
Well, the Omaha World-Herald found that claim false. I've been well on record many, many, many times saying I'm opposed to privatization of Social Security, and I thank the World Herald for calling that mistruth out. Also, I've read the balanced budget amendment that I voted on, and it gave provisions to protect Social Security in the effort of balancing the budget. It was not a mandatory cut to Social Security. It had a provision that allowed Congress to make cuts other places. So that also is not the case. And in the end, when you say that you want to raise the cap, that is essentially a 13% increase on all those taxes, along with the increase of taxes that you also want to put on the income tax. And so you put that together, you're talking a huge tax increase.
Time. Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
Congressman Bacon has voted 97% of the time with his own party. Mitch McConnell just told us, he just told all Americans that Social Security and Medicare were on the chopping block because he and the Republican Party gave a huge tax break to millionaires in this country, and now they have to pay for the $1.5 trillion that they've basically given away and added to the deficit. Congressman Bacon, in voting with his party, will vote to cut your Social Security. That's just the case that we have in front of us.
Okay, back to our panelists now. Julie Cornell has the next question for Kara Eastman. Julie.
Ms. Eastman, we've heard from more than one voter that candidates promise independent action, but then they fail to deliver once elected. What do you say to the voter who fears that your original ideas will turn into party line politics in Washington?
Well, part of the reason why I decided to run was because I'm tired of people putting their party before the country. And this partisan divide we have is making Congress so that it's just ineffective. I'm somebody who likes to get in there, roll up my sleeves, and get things accomplished. That's my reputation in the community. That's what I've been trained to do. I was not recruited to run for Congress. In the primary, did not have the support of my party. And so I'm a free agent. I have refused corporate PAC money in my campaign because I believe that politicians should speak for people and not on behalf of corporate interests and special interests. We need people who are going to stand up and fight for people right now more than ever. My opponent, on the other hand, has taken a lot of money from corporations and then votes in their interests. He's taken money from big pharma, big tobacco, insurance companies, and then he votes with them. By voting to give a tax break to very large corporations, he did just that. He supported the corporations that support him. All of that money, all of those tax breaks that he gave to millionaires and billionaires, that money has been funneled into the Republican Party, and that's how all those attack ads get funded. We need somebody who's going to stand up and say, I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm not beholden to the party. The people that I'm beholden to are the people of this district, are the people of the 2nd District who I've been out talking to for a year and a half at their doors.
Don Bacon, minute and a half.
I ran 2 years ago to fix our broken tax code that forced our companies to pay double or triple in some cases what other countries were charging their companies. And we were the only major country that charged overseas taxes twice. That left $3 trillion overseas that could be invested here. We fixed that. I also campaigned to fix our military, to help out with our VA, which we've done. Also to lower the premiums of our health insurance by 20 and 30%, which I did vote for that, but we could not get that through the Senate. I have done 100% of what I said I would do. And frankly, I have voted 100% what I thought was best for this district. I'm a patriot. I have served our country for 30 years. I want our country and our district to be strong, vibrant, economically growing, and that's what I have done in Congress. And I got to point out, when we talk about voting with party, I think when you look where Kara Eastman stands with her party, she's to the left of most of her party. She's to the left of Nancy Pelosi on health care, to the left of Nancy Pelosi on Second Amendment rights and taxes when she talks about Eisenhower-era tax rates. And she's to the left of Nancy Pelosi when you talk about free tuition that Nancy Pelosi doesn't even say. So it's hard to find someone that is to the left of Nancy Pelosi in Nebraska, but she's that. And so I think she's going to be to the left of their party faction.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
So the policy stances that I have are actually widely supported by the majority of Americans and widely supported by people of this district. I know that because I've gone out and talked to so many people at their doors. They're looking to somebody to fight for health care, for for education and for a clean, safe, healthy environment. What the congressman did was he voted for a tax plan that now what we're going to see is that 13% of jobs in Nebraska are going to be offshored. The Communication Workers Alliance is really upset about this because their call center workers are going to see this. And health insurance premiums have gone up under his leadership. It is time for somebody who's going to stand up for health care.
Congressman Bacon, 30 seconds.
Those premiums would have gone down if the bill would have passed that I voted for. And we have a record low unemployment in our country, going back 49 years, 2.8% in Nebraska. We have GDP growth of 3 times the amount when I came in 2 years ago because of the policies we've passed. America is stronger. Our defense is stronger. That's because I followed my commitments of what I said I would do 2 years ago. So again, I'm about making our country strong, economically vibrant and growing, and we've delivered on that.
David, you have the next question for Congressman Bacon.
Congressman, let's keep talking taxes here. You've expressed differences, both of you, in your views of tax reform, and now the president is suggesting more tax cuts are needed. For the record, do you think the Republican tax overhaul should be changed, expanded, or eliminated? And what is the highest tax rate you would support? Be very clear on that tax rate, the highest one that you would support.
I think we have it right now. Let's see how the continued results of this economy that is growing. It's the strongest economy going back 5 decades. Again, the lowest unemployment in 49 years and great GDP growth. I mean, the previous president said that 2% is the new normal, and it would take like a special wand to get it over there. We were at 4.2% last quarter, 3.5% this quarter. So the tax reform has worked, and it has not led to the deficit. It's been the spending that has been the problem that we have to get control over. So I would favor minor tweaks to what we have done this past year. I think we should make the individual tax rates permanent because they expire in 2025. And I also think that we need to expand the IRAs and HSA accounts and build on those because I think those are things that our voters would like to see. But right now, I stand right where we're at with the high rates. I think they were right, and I think we have the right business rate. Our business rates were good back in the 1980s, but the rest of the world lowered their corporate rates, their business rates, and we did not. And that made we were out of date. So we were paying 35% marginal, was lower effective, but the Canadians were paying 15% marginal, and it was lower, also effective. And you can go through each country, we were paying double or triple what our key competitors, trade competitors were paying. It put our businesses at an unfair disadvantage, and I want our businesses to compete and win.
Kara Eastman, a minute and a half.
So we know that that tax bill is not working for all of us. We know that the tax bill was a handout to the millionaires and very large corporations in this country who don't really need the tax break, where the rest of us do. The fact that the president is now even saying that we need middle-class tax cuts shows that that tax bill didn't cut taxes for the middle class. Congressman Bacon has talked about revenue being up, and PolitiFact rated that half true. This is what we hear from him a lot, are half-truths. We need to bring the corporate tax rate back up, if not a little bit higher than what it was. I would support around 38, 39%, because what happens is the effective tax rate, what corporations actually end up paying, right now that's 14%. That is not enough to make up the deficit in this country. The deficit is not because of excess spending. Again, he's talking about cutting spending. That's where his party is talking about cutting Medicare and Social Security. That's going to impact all of us. But what actually did happen is we increased the tax deficit, the deficit in the country by $1.5 trillion by giving a handout to billionaires and millionaires. These are the facts. Spending is not the problem. The problem is the fact that we have a Republican Party right now that is more beholden to the very wealthy in this country than to regular working people. And I am somebody who's going to stand up and fight for the rest of us.
Don Bacon, you have 30 seconds.
90% of our constituents will be getting a tax break this year, but you heard it here, right here first. She wants to raise corporate rates or business rates from 21% to 38%. That would hurt American businesses. It will grind our economic growth to a halt. You will see businesses fleeing America again. You know, in this district, we see companies growing growing the number of jobs. And we see Warner Trucking giving out 2,400 average raises to all their truck drivers. We have small businesses growing like Omaha Track, going from 200 people to 260. We see many of our banks paying a minimum wage of $15 an hour. She's going to undermine the economic growth in our country with raising those taxes.
Congressman, that's your time's up on there. Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
Well, clearly we don't have the economic growth that you're touting because our deficit is too high. And when you talk about hurting American businesses, there are American businesses in the heartland, in the Midwest, that are hurting. We know Caterpillar is going to see their revenues go down. Ford, Union Pacific is laying off people. Congressman Bacon continuously touts that Apple is creating new jobs. Well, first of all, they've said they don't actually create the new jobs, that their alliances do. And second of all, why does he continue to tout what's happening in Silicon Valley instead of touting and actually helping the Silicon Prairie?
Okay, David, you have another question directed towards Kara Eastman.
Ms. Eastman, tonight there are people in their 20s and 30s buried under college debt. Other families wondering how they'll afford sending a teenager to college. What role should Congress play in helping families afford college, and should some student loan debt be erased?
So I serve on the board of governors of Metropolitan Community College. I was publicly elected to that board in 2014, and I'm the vice chair there. And I think Metro is one of the greatest beacons of hope in our community, especially for getting people out of poverty and into high-quality education and good-paying jobs, because we have direct ties with the business communities here. Our college debt is now over $1.5 trillion in the United States of America. Our students are drowning in debt. I see students that are unable to go to Metro, even though it's only $64 a credit hour, and it's the most affordable game in town, and we are the cheapest community college in the state. We need to do something about our student debt crisis. That is why I have said that I support making two-year colleges debt-free. I don't believe in free because I think you actually need a little bit of skin in the game, but I do believe that we need to alleviate this burden. I was talking to a woman the other day at her door who told me that she has $30,000 or $45,000 in student loans. She is not able to buy a home or buy a car because that affects her credit rating. This is a terrible travesty for this woman who decided to go and get a higher education to get a decent paying job. She's making minimum wage, which in Nebraska is way too low, and she's not able to fulfill the American dream of buying a home and buying a car. She said she's never going to be able to pay that off. And we need to find a solution. And there are a lot of creative solutions out there right now to tackling this, and I am all in because I want to make sure that we are making sure that our students can actually fulfill their dreams.
Don Bacon, minute and a half.
Thank you. Great question again. She has proposed in the past to give free college education for anyone earning under $125,000. That is $610 billion over a 10-year time frame. She says spending's not a problem. Well, she's got plans to hike up spending significantly. She's also talked about writing off the debts of college students. That's $1.5 trillion. Again, spending's not an issue for her on this. She's going to foist this on the taxpayers. And I appreciate what the World Herald reported yesterday, that while she was at that Metro board, she actually hiked up tuition 20%. So while she's talking about college being too expensive, and while the state has paid more money into Metro's coffers, she was part of the problem of raising those premiums 20%. Now, what do I think we should do? I think we should be looking at how we can help students get better interest rates and refinance and renegotiate their loans because they are too high. So I think that's one thing that we can do. Secondly, we got to realize that the federal government is part of the problem. We put so much red tape on our universities, so they have to do monthly reporting, quarterly reporting, and all these different reports have to hire administrative staffs. And I used to work at University of Bellevue, so I saw this, and I've worked with other universities. A lot of their costs go to administration, not to their professors. You see more adjunct professors today because they have to afford this huge administrative cost. So I think we need to do a review at the federal level, how we can lift some of that weight off the shoulders of universities so they can put money back towards their professors and keep tuition low.
Okay, Kara Eastman, you have 30 seconds.
So, Congressman Bacon, you just said that you were not okay with reducing $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, but you are okay with paying $1.5 trillion as a handout to millionaires in this country. This is the problem, that we have a little bit of an issue with our priorities. On the Metro board, when the Republican governor of this state continues to cut funding for public education, we have two choices. We can raise tuition or raise property taxes. Property taxes are already too high in Nebraska. We raise tuition a little bit, much less than my predecessors on the board, and completely in line with the rate of inflation. And we are still the cheapest game in town. So don't come after Metro. Come after your own policies that are creating a deficit in this country and a complete immoral lack when it comes to actually prioritization in this country.
Okay, Don Bacon, you have 30 seconds.
Again, she voted for a 20% increase in premiums and is complaining about the problem. But I even think worse yet, you know, I've made a 99% of all my votes in Washington. I'm rated the top 3% for attendance there while we're in a campaign season. She's missed 40% of the hearings at Metro this year, 40%. She's put her job, what she was elected to do, her constituents, behind politicking on this case. And I'll tell you, wherever I've been, 60% is an F. And I've done 99% attendance, that's an A.
Okay, Julie has our next question. First response coming from Congressman Bacon. Julie.
Mr. Bacon, a little more personal question now. What's the most recent book that you've read, and what did you learn from it?
I'm finishing up Billy Graham's book right now. I went to his funeral at the Rotunda or at the memorial service. I admire Billy Graham. He's one of the greatest evangelists we've had in a century or two. I think one of the most, he's made a difference in millions and millions and millions of people's lives. And what I get from the Billy Graham book, and there's a lot of takeaways from that, but I always remember that my life is short and eternity is a long time. So I want to make sure that I'm living my life serving the greater good and serving an almighty creator. Because in the end, there's treasures in heaven that don't rust or get stolen, but the treasures in heaven are always there. I admire Billy Graham. I admire his family. It was such an honor to be a part of that rotunda and that memorial service and honoring such a great man in America.
Kara Eastman, minute and a half.
So actually just finished 2 books. One is Don't Think of an Elephant by George Lakoff, because when I decided to run for Congress, one of the things that I heard from people in the Democratic Party is they felt like the Democrats needed a strong message. And that book really speaks to how important it is for us to be able to go out there and talk to voters in a way that resonates with their values and actually speaks to how we can come together as a country to solve some of our most critical issues. The other book I just finished reading is on grief. My mother passed away a year ago, and I'm blanking on the name of the book, but you know, having your mom die, my mom was a single mom and I'm an only child, and so having your mom die during a congressional race has been pretty tough. And one of the things I wanted to make sure was that I was processing that grief in a way and not just burying that, especially for my daughter, because her death was really, but she was close to her grandmother, and that was really hard on her. So I'm, you know, basically my life over the last year and a half has been politics and dealing with my mother's death. So those are the 2 things that I'm reading about.
Don Bacon, you have 30 seconds.
I'll just say I want to empathize with Kara and the loss of her mom. I know how tragic that is. My mom lived with me in the last stages of her life. She died of lupus, and I still not got over the loss of my sister's life as well, and I've still processed that. And again, if it wasn't for my faith, I would struggle with that. My favorite books, I enjoy history. I enjoy studying about leadership. I enjoy reading about Abraham Lincoln, who had the moral courage and the fortitude to overcome such adversity and end up winning the Civil War. I love reading about General Grant. So I love studying great leaders who've made a difference in our country, who were flawed, but through hard work and resilience and character overcame.
Kara Eastman, 30 seconds.
Well, thank you, Congressman, for your condolences. I appreciate that. I'm not exactly sure what more of a rebuttal we're looking for here, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about grief, because everyone needs to process it.
Okay. So our questioning of the candidates is complete. Now it's time for their closing remarks. Just like we did at the beginning with a coin flip with the candidates, we also had this determined by a coin flip, and Kara Eastman will begin closing arguments.
I decided to run for Congress because of my mom. My mom was prescribed a pill after having been diagnosed with cancer 5 times that cost $2,500. And she was not able to afford to take that pill, which meant that she wasn't able to leave the house until she passed away a year ago. So when I started, it was about her, but this is not about her. It's not about me, and it's certainly not about Congressman Bacon. This race is about you. And the idea right now that in our country, we are seeing a complete destruction of all of the principles and the values that our country was founded upon. I am running because I feel a sense of desperation for our country right now, and in particular for our children, whom I've been fighting for in my work over the last 20 years, and in particular my work at Omaha Healthy Kids Alliance. We need leaders right now. We need leaders who are going to stand up and fight for regular working people. I have been fighting for racial, social, and environmental justice my entire career. That's what I love to do. And I believe that we need more people like me, more social workers, more people who are willing to buck the system a little bit, more people who are wanting to get in there and actually get things done, because that's what Nebraskans deserve. You deserve a leader who's going to be a check on the president, who's going to work across the aisle to actually find solutions to problems and make sure that you have health care that you deserve, make sure that you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table, and make sure that you are not drowning in debt. And those are the top 3 things that I hear at the doors from people. In knocking 160,000 doors with my amazing team, we have a great pulse of what's going on. We have a great knowledge of the pulse of what's happening in our district, and we need a leader who's going to fight for you. I would be so honored to earn your vote on my birthday, November 6th. Thank you.
Don Bacon, 2 minutes.
Thank you, KETV, for a great job tonight. I want to point out, we've been knocking doors too. We've done over 200,000 doors these last 2 cycles. I've been doing doors every night when I have spare time since I've been back from Congress. I think Brad Ashford made a very good point last May when he talked to the Wall Street Journal. He said that Kara Eastman's going to have to convince this district to support her despite her liberal views, more liberal than what this district has. I don't think she has made that case. You will see in issue after issue, she is actually left of Nancy Pelosi. We've already mentioned tonight on health care. Nancy Pelosi doesn't support single payer. On rewriting the Second Amendment, you don't hear that even from Nancy Pelosi. When it looks to the taxes, we talk about Eisenhower-era tax rates. Nancy Pelosi doesn't even say that. And free tuition, and it's not free, it's $610 billion. That is something you don't even hear either from the minority leadership. In contrast, I bring, as the most senior active duty retired veteran, leadership and results. And I'm proud of what we have done with having the best economy in 5 decades, the lowest unemployment in 49 years, GDP growth 3 times what we had when I first came in. And we have got our military healthy again, and I've been the leader on that. I've been the only freshman that would work with the Senate that was selected for that, to reconcile 2 different bills. And I got to do that twice. We have made a huge difference to our national security, and I've been at the forefront, and I look forward to doing that some more. We've also made some great work for our VA, but we have outstanding issues out there: immigration, health care, getting people back to work that are on government programs. And I think folks are going to want a pragmatic conservative. Now, I've been endorsed by all 10 mayors in this district, Republican and Democrat, 10 different unions, to include the fire union this past week, and the Omaha World Herald, that says I am a pragmatist. I've worked across the aisle. I'm willing to compromise. But the most important endorsement is you, the voter. I ask for your vote and your endorsement this Tuesday. Put me back to work serving this district and this country. Thank you.
We also close tonight with an appeal to you, the voter. In addition to this important race in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, there are 2 other contested races for the House in Nebraska, as well as 4 House races in Iowa. Nebraskans and Iowans will make a choice for governor. Nebraska has a decision to make for U.S. Senator, and 19 contested races for Nebraska legislature. That is in addition to a host of other state, county, and local races. In the 2014 off-year general election, voter turnout in Douglas County was 45%. We hope we'll see much higher numbers in 2018. That concludes our debate. Want again to thank the Greater Omaha Chamber for its partnership in this production, and of course like to thank the candidates for their time and their service to Nebraska, Don Bacon and Kara Eastman. Thank you. I'm Rob McCartney. Thank you for joining us. Please vote November 6th and have a good evening.